There is a moment in the Qur'an that reveals something very deep about the ego. God commands the angels to bow before Adam, and Iblis refuses. But what makes this moment so powerful is not only the refusal itself, it is the reason behind it. Iblis says, "I am better than him." He looks at Adam and sees clay. He looks at himself and sees fire. And from that comparison, a spiritual disease appears: pride. This is one of the first lessons Islam gives us about the ego. The ego does not always begin with obvious evil. Sometimes it begins with comparison. Sometimes it begins with the quiet feeling that I am more deserving, more important, or somehow above another person. Iblis did not deny that God existed. He knew. But knowledge alone was not enough, because his ego stood between knowledge and surrender.
Today, when people hear the word ego, they usually imagine someone arrogant and loud. But the ego is not always loud. Sometimes it hides behind insecurity, sadness, the need to be right, or the fear of being forgotten. In Islamic spirituality, this lower self is often called the Nafs. It is the part of us that wants attention without humility, comfort without discipline, and control without trust. The Nafs is difficult to see because it speaks with our own voice. When it feels insulted, we say, "I am hurt." When it wants praise, we say, "I just want to be appreciated." When it wants revenge, we say, "I only want justice." And sometimes pain is real. Islam does not ask us to ignore that, but it asks us to look deeper and ask, is this coming from the heart that wants truth, or from the ego that wants to protect its throne?
There is an old spiritual story about a student who comes to a teacher and says, "I want to know God." The teacher listens and asks, "Then why are you so full of yourself?" The student is offended because he expected a beautiful answer, maybe a secret prayer or a hidden wisdom. But the teacher points to the real problem. The room inside him was already occupied. He wanted God, but he also wanted admiration. He wanted truth, but he also wanted to be known as someone who had truth. This is why the spiritual path is not only about learning more information. A person can quote saints, speak about love, talk about humility, and still be attached to being seen as wise. The ego does not disappear just because we use spiritual words. Sometimes it only changes clothes. Before, it wanted to be admired for status or success. Later, it wants to be admired for depth, knowledge, or purity. The costume changes, but the hunger remains the same.
Islamic spirituality does not teach us to hate ourselves. The goal is not to look inside and despise your existence. The goal is to see yourself correctly. You are not a god. You are not the center of the universe. You are a servant of God, and there is freedom in that. The ego hears the word servant and feels humiliated because the ego wants a throne. But the heart hears it and feels relief because the heart is tired of pretending to be in control. Modern life makes this harder because almost everything around us feeds the ego. We are told to build an image, prove our value, display our happiness, and measure our worth through the reactions of others. A person can wake up and before even speaking to God, check a screen to see if the world has approved of them. Did they like me? Did they notice me? Did they respond? Slowly, the soul becomes dependent on little mirrors. But the ego can never be satisfied. Feed it praise and it wants more praise. Feed it attention and it wants more attention. Feed it success and it wants another success. This is why someone can be admired and still feel empty, successful and still anxious, surrounded by people and still unseen. The ego can collect attention, but it cannot create peace. The heart is different. In Islam, the heart is not just the place of emotion, it is the place of recognition. It is the part of us that can turn toward God and become alive through remembrance. This is why dhikr is so central in Islam. Remembrance is the slow return of the heart from the illusion of me back to the reality of God.
When a person says Allahu Akbar, they are not only saying that God is greater than the world, they are also reminding themselves that God is greater than their fear, greater than their desire, greater than their reputation, and greater than the story their ego keeps telling them. Slowly, the ego begins to lose its power, not because the self is destroyed, but because it is placed where it belongs. Your ego is not who you are. It is a voice inside you, but not every inner voice is your truth. It is a hunger inside you, but not every hunger should be fed. It is a mask you may have worn for so long that you started to mistake it for your face. The real you is deeper than praise, deeper than fear, deeper than the image you protect, and deeper than the story you perform for others. So the next time your ego feels wounded, do not rush to obey it. Watch how it speaks. Watch how it exaggerates. Watch how it turns small things into threats, because it is terrified of being small. Then remind it of the truth. You were not created to be worshipped. You were created to worship. You were not created to carry the weight of being the center. You were created to return to the one who is. And maybe that is where peace begins. Not in becoming more admired or more important, but in becoming free from the exhausting need to be the main character in every story. The ego says, make yourself bigger. The heart says, return.